Hello, and thank you for joining us today as we focus on housing. My name is Mark Science, and I'll be your host today as we take a look at affordable rental housing issues here in Iowa City and all of Johnson County. We'll also explore some affordable housing truths versus myths. I'm joined today by Bronis Petit, Director of Client Advocacy Services with DVIP, Domestic Violence Intervention Program, and by Mary Ann Dennis, the Executive Director of the Housing Fellowship here in Iowa City. All three of us also happen to be members of the Johnson County Affordable Homes Coalition, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more later. I think we all know that the availability of decent affordable rental housing continues to be a major challenge for our local residents, and some things like aging rental stock, units that are coming out of their low-income rental status, high cost of new construction are just some of the things that we find make safe and affordable rental housing an ongoing challenge. But when we talk about rental housing, whether it's to rent or to buy, we should probably get our definitions straight first. So I think there should be varying definitions and understandings of what affordable housing is, and maybe Mary Ann, you could kind of give us a sense of who we're talking about, what income levels we're talking about.
Okay, thanks Mark, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Generally, when we talk about affordable housing, we define that as when households pay no more than 30% of their income for their housing costs, whether that be ownership, their mortgage, their principal interest, taxes and insurance, or for rental housing, their rent and utilities.
And utilities.
And utilities. So generally people who pay more than 30% of their income for those costs would be what we call cost burdened. Mm-hmm. Okay? As far as income levels are concerned, for affordable rental housing, we concentrate on households in our area whose incomes are at or below 80% of the area median income. Okay. Although different projects and different funding have different income requirements, and so many projects, for instance, would have most of the households having to be at or below 60% of the area median income, some at or below 40% of the area median income, and some at or below 30% of the area median income.
Okay. I've heard the term workforce housing before. Can you maybe delineate between workforce housing versus affordable housing, what we're talking about there?
Sure. When I talk about workforce housing, I talk about housing households whose incomes fall between 100% of the area median income, or right at the area median income, or at 120% of the area median income, or at 140% of the area median income. Okay. So let me give you a few examples of I'm throwing out a lot of percentages and numbers, but just to get into dollars and cents. For instance, for a family of 4 in Johnson County, 80% of the area median income would be $65,800 a year. For somebody then, for a household of 4 at 140% of area median income, their income would be $115,220
quite a significant jump there.
Yeah, and then of course it goes down exponentially.
Sure. Bronis, what would you say are some of the common challenges or obstacles faced by someone who might be needing to access affordable housing in our area? Some of the things you've maybe run into.
Again, thank you, Mark, for having me. There are many challenges that I see the clients that we serve face when it comes to finding affordable housing in the Johnson County area. First of all, the cost of living here is the highest in the state of Iowa, and so cost is a big challenge. The availability of housing, the housing that we may have, with the cost being so expensive, it is very difficult for individuals to find housing. Competition, we will talk about, I believe, further in this session about the university and what that does for affordable housing with students and faculty, and how that limits the type of housing that's available to people in this community. If a client has, or a person has any type of issue with credit or poor credit that hinders them from being able to get housing in this area, if there is a criminal history, depending on what that is, even if there has been a substantial amount of time since the offense, or the misdemeanor, whatever it is, that causes challenges. If there is a previous eviction on a person's background, that poses challenges. In this community, the type of employment that is available, if you have limited education, makes it difficult to find housing if it's available to afford it. And also, if you are a single parent, childcare causes issues when it comes to affordable housing. Because if you're a parent, you need to be able to work, you need to be able to afford childcare to be able to afford your housing. So I hope all that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it. You know, I think one of the things that I think surprised me when I kind of started getting into this affordable housing issue is the fact that a lot of people, just your average working folks, are who we're talking about. You know, your service workers and healthcare professionals and teachers, and you know, the average Joe and Joni are the ones that are impacted by this. I know you work with a population of people that's generally in crisis, and so their needs are probably a little different. They're more short-term, they're more immediate for shelter and for services. For those folks, I think we're probably talking about typically they're going to look to emergency shelter type situations for their housing needs, which isn't really what we're talking about in affordable housing. That's not really the same thing. Was that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So to add to that, majority of the clients that we serve, we have two sides. We have clients that are within the community that have experienced some form of intimate partner violence and are needing assistance, and so they may be in housing, but because of the violence that has taken place, they need to find other housing in the community. Then we have clients who are fleeing abusive situations, and so they come into shelter, and that is a short-term situation. But if their desire, which a lot of times their desire is to remain in this community, that's a long-term situation of trying to figure out how to get them on their feet and to find housing here.
Find this long-term solution.
Correct.
Yeah. And Marianne, I think you've said before, you have a lot of families in your program.
Yes, what the Housing Fellowship does is largely affordable rental housing for what people call low-income families. We have 168 rental homes that are scattered throughout Iowa City, Coralville, and North Liberty, and we rent to families.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, working families with kids that have, you know, like all the issues we talked about earlier. And then I think the next level, as I understand, the next level of housing is people who may be ready to move out of the emergency situation. Things are improving, and they're getting things taken care of, but they might not be ready to go into a rental or definitely into a purchase situation. And that's, I think, what they typically refer to as just some transitional housing in that case. And again, that's not really what we're talking about today.
Right.
That's an intermediate housing situation where there's probably some additional services provided. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, normally with a transitional housing program, there's also case management. The ultimate goal is to assist a person in being able to find permanent, sustainable housing.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So, Marianne, who are the people that need affordable housing? I mean, why? What type of people are needing access to this kind of thing? We've touched on a couple of them here. What are you seeing in your population and some of the other populations?
Well, at the Housing Fellowship, in Johnson County in general, we know that the average salary for 6 of the 21 employment sectors are not high enough to afford rent on a 2-bedroom house.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
Those 6 employment sectors represent over half of the employees in Johnson County, including workers in food preparation and serving, sales, production, personal care, health care, support, and farming. So the Housing Fellowship, our families are largely single mothers, although in 2014, the single parent household represented 54% of our rental homes.
Wow.
So 53% or 33% were 2-parent households. So what that means is we also have some households who have people with disabilities, but generally they're related.
Okay.
Related family in some way. We provided housing to, in 2014, 349 children. 74% of the heads of the households in our rental homes work full-time.
Full-time. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a common misperception that people maybe have about people who take advantage of or access, housing assistance programs is that they don't work. They're
Right.
deadbeats or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And I think, as we all know, it's just not the case.
Right.
It's just not the case.
What I like to tell people is, I live in Iowa City. I get my car fixed in Iowa City. I got my hair done in Iowa City. I shop for my groceries in Iowa City, and I use a lot of the services that are provided in our community. Many of the people that live in affordable rental homes are the exact people who provide me with those services.
Right.
They also, a large percentage, are workers who provide health care to our elderly parents or our persons with developmental disabilities.
Yeah, I think that was another statistic I saw, was that a very large percentage of people with limited incomes, your seniors, your persons with disabilities, where they're on a limited income, and
Families.
and there's families in that situation too. Absolutely, absolutely, and so that's obviously a big challenge. And I think it's sometimes frustrating to hear those myths about who's really taking advantage of these programs, because it's really a lot of our neighbors, our family, our friends, and our coworkers, to be perfectly honest. Ronis, can you give us a specific example, hopefully, of someone that you worked with recently that needed access to some safe, affordable housing, and what was their experience, or what kind of results did they get?
Well, I've worked with many clients down through the years, but something more recent. I was working with a grandmother, actually, who had 2 grandchildren that she had primary custody of. And she had come into Iowa City and came fleeing an abusive relationship, and wanted to be able to find safety and provide some stability for her grandkids whose parents or whose mother had passed away recently.
Oh, wow.
And so the first thing she had to do was come into this community. She came from outside the community, and she had to learn our community and learn what jobs were available. She was able to find a job within a few weeks of being here. An incredibly hardworking woman. She got 2 service jobs, she would work probably from 8 to 5 during the day, and then she would come and make sure grandkids were okay, and sometimes she would have to work additional shifts so that she could save up her money. And once she came to the end of her stay in shelter, she had enough money saved up, and then with the assistance that we were able to provide, to find a home, a home that she could rent in this community. It was a stretch. It was not 30% of her income. It was probably more like 80% of her income. So she was able to find a place, and I checked in with her recently, and she is still doing okay. It's a struggle because, as we know from what Marianne said, affordable housing is 30% should be 30% of your income, including your utilities. And so when you're paying 80%, or more, just to have a roof over your head and to have lights on and to have water running, it makes it very challenging to provide for the other necessities that are needed. She is making it, but it's a struggle.
Excellent.
And so that is one situation that I've dealt with recently.
You mentioned she came in from other areas, and I think you told me the other day you service a rather large multi-county area around here in southeast Iowa.
Correct.
So I'm assuming it was from someone coming in from one of those areas.
Correct. DVIP provides services to 8 counties in the southeast region of Iowa.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you did a wonderful segue into the next question I was going to ask Marianne, and you both can answer this. And it's let's talk about why is affordable housing important? Why is it important that someone has an affordable roof over their head? What does it matter?
Well, Mark, here's what I know. If a family or a household can afford their rent and utilities, or their mortgage and insurance and all that other stuff, and they like where they live, then they stay. And stable households end up going out and creating or resulting in stable neighborhoods, which stable neighborhoods then result in stable communities. And so I believe that stable, affordable housing is crucial to having stable communities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've also heard there's some studies and stuff have been done around kids and how they do in school, how their health is, how kids and adults how their health is when they are comfortable in a secure home. Are these types of things that there is data that backs this up?
Sure.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
It makes, if I could just add, it
Absolutely.
makes all the difference in a child's performance when they have a stable environment that they can grow up in, a home where there's protection and their needs are provided for.
I mean, I would imagine if you don't know, if you're not sure where you're going to sleep tonight, you're not sure where you're going to eat tonight or something like that,
Right.
you're going to not do well in school. That just makes very obvious sense.
It's not the priority.
Yeah,
Survival
and
is.
if you can't afford your rent, then you probably can't afford clothes, you probably can't afford medical care, you're probably going in the emergency room instead of going to a doctor regularly, all those kind of things. It's probably, I can see how it would be a trickle down. The stability, Marion, you talked about the stability. I know the other day when we talked, you mentioned, I think, your average family has been with you 4 or 5 years, something like that?
Yes, over our average stay for one of our households is 53 months.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, that also includes the households that occasionally we have to ask to leave.
That's your average. That's your average. Yeah.
Average. So the Housing Fellowship, for the last 25 years, has been providing affordable rental homes, and we have households who have been with us for 14, 17 years, long term.
Wow, yeah.
That has provided an opportunity for the children to have a stable home pretty much their entire school career.
Excellent. And I can tell you, as a realtor and as someone who works with people in rentals a lot, 53 months in one place is a long average for this town. I would tell you that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people who hop around every 6 months, so that's pretty impressive. When you talk about why it's important and what we as a community need to be concerned about affordable housing. Iowa City Manager Tom Marcus made a comment recently to one of the City Council's work sessions, and I thought it was very, very thought-provoking, and I thought it was a little challenging. I mean, I think it was kind of a challenge there, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said basically if we as a community think that availability of safe and affordable housing for all of our residents is a priority, then we really need to treat affordable housing as a public policy issue, which I thought that was a new way for me to look at it. And if as a public policy issue, we should expect to devote public resources to this. Any feedback from you folks on that kind of comment?
I would say I definitely think that this is something that we should be devoting resources to. When you were talking about before why affordable housing is so important, it really is a basic necessity, and it should be a right for people to be able to have a home and to be able to afford that and live a decent life, because all of these individuals in some kind of way are investing and impacting this community. Marianne touched on the service jobs and the jobs that people do in this community. They should be able to live here. And so I do believe that we should be investing resources in creating housing so that those people can be closer to where they have to work.
I've heard some colleagues' mantra is if I live here, I should be able to, if I work here, I should be able to live here.
Right.
And that just it's very obvious, but sometimes you have to say that and think about it. As a realtor, I back up. Iowa City, Johnson County is the most expensive housing market in the state.
Correct.
It is the reality. And a lot of that goes back to the construction costs and the land. And land is very expensive. So you start with expensive land, you add on expensive construction costs, and pretty soon it's very challenging to even build a house that remains affordable. And Marianne, you're shaking your head.
Yes.
You're really a developer of housing, of affordable housing. You also then rent it and manage it, but you start from the beginning.
Right.
What is your experience with some of these challenges of building affordable housing here in Johnson County?
Well, there seems to be quite a few barriers in Johnson County. Like you mentioned, the cost of the land and various other issues that play into the cost of developing housing. What we like to do at the Housing Fellowship, and the largest source of funding in the United States of America for affordable rental housing, is the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. So for instance, we can acquire land and build houses that fit into the neighborhood, that meet the covenants and restrictions, that are indistinguishable from the surrounding houses. And the tax credit program provides equity into that project.
Okay.
Okay. So what that means is we reduce our hard debt.
Oh.
If we can build the houses with less debt, we can lower the rents. So for instance, a couple years ago, we built 22 homes scattered throughout Iowa City and North Liberty. And that was about a $5.6 million project. We carry amortized debt on that project at $300,000.
Wow.
The Iowa Finance Authority, the Iowa City federal funds that we accessed, and some other state federal funds were basically forgivable loans. Okay. What that means is then through the tax credit program, we were able to get investors to give us basically $4.1 million. Now they basically have control of the houses. We manage them, but we have to meet their compliance. So what that means is all of these homes were three-bedroom homes. Okay.
Wow.
The rents on the homes are either $704 a month or $906 a month, depending upon the household income. Again, the houses are indistinguishable from all of the other ones in the surrounding neighborhoods.
I know a group took a tour last fall,
Yes.
a bus tour, and
Yes.
drove around to various projects, so yours, Habitat for Humanity, other different projects, the city's
Yes.
projects.
Yes.
And everyone was shocked at the fact that in most of the cases, you would never know that house was a low-income, affordable home sitting in a neighborhood.
Right.
But the key is that we can lower the rents
Yeah, yeah.
and still provide nice houses the families like to live in, and so they stay.
Right.
Now, something you said to me the other day, not only can you keep the rents low, you are required, there's rent caps
That's
based
absolutely
on the funding,
true. Yes,
which
that's
blew me
absolutely
away.
true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. And so, again, the Housing Fellowship is a housing developer, but we're a private nonprofit. We usually, all of the homes that we develop have some sort of public financing. And all the time that public financing has, as you can imagine, some strings attached. You know about that. One of those is that the rents are strictly controlled. So what that means is the difference for many landlords, and especially in this area, when you turn over a home, there's an expense. And private for-profit landlords generally, and this is a wise business practice, then they raise the rent to meet those maintenance and capital improvement costs. We can't necessarily do that because our rents, the federal government caps our rents.
Interesting. Yeah, 'cause, costs go up, taxes go up. Someone lives in a house for 5 years and leaves, you got to replace carpet, you need to repaint, and those are all expenses that continue to go up constantly.
So that's
very interesting.
Yeah, and we try to maintain, we try and be very fiscally responsible, and so and maintain reserves and capital improvement budgets for those kinds of things.
Yeah, I just was very surprised that you were limited as to how much you could actually charge. So I think we see why it's challenging for developers to really build affordable housing in our community. Even when they want to, it's still challenging without some public resources. Really, is what it gets down to. I mean, I think that the theme I keep hearing over and over is it's very hard to do affordable low-income housing without public assistance of some kind. Okay, that's.
And you have to meet the building codes.
Oh yeah. Oh sure.
So you can't build,
anything.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure you have to do all that. That's right. We have a lot of building codes here in town. Yeah. We touched on it. We touched on it earlier about the University of Iowa. You gave a preview that we were coming back to this, and I don't want to be negative here. I think it's just a reality. We have thousands of students looking for homes each year. We have thousands of employees at the university and the university hospitals that are looking for homes, and that's obviously impacting the demand. It's a basic supply and demand issue, and when you look at some of the employees in particular, or grad students who are living on a very a low income, a tight budget, the need for affordable housing is critical to be able to have those people, again, live in the community they work in and they go to school in. And so we know we also know there's a severe shortage of student housing right now in the area, and the university is tasked with getting more students in the coming years. So any additional thoughts on how that impacts your work or the community in general, or our clients or residents' ability to afford living in the community that they work at or go to school?
I think it has a big impact. Our reality is, even though we work with people that are from this community, some people come from outside the community seeking a safe place to put their roots down and build a family. The reality is that everyone is not able to do so, and so we have a lot more families that are having to move outside of the community, and if they find a job that's a decent paying job here in Iowa City or surrounding areas, they have to commute to come in. And then the reality is some families will have a better quality of life in some of the surrounding areas that have better paying jobs and cheaper housing. And so it's something that we deal with or something that I see on a daily basis, because we're all competing for the same housing. And you mentioned the University of Iowa, which plays a big role in that because of the demand, but there are also some other larger employers in this community where there are good paying jobs for people that have limited education. But again, with the lack of housing, it means that people have to commute to come in.
I think we, as a realtor, I know you've got to go about half an hour out before you see a real significant drop in home prices. And I learned recently, which I was very fascinated by, the university apparently has a very extensive van pool program where they literally go out with vans to all these surrounding communities and bring people in. And I assume it's because those people, in so many cases, it may be because those people can't afford to live right here in the metro area. And so, I wonder if it raises the question of employer assistance housing. And again, I don't want to pick on the university, because you're right, this applies to any large employer in any area. But I know there in some areas we've seen employer assisted housing where, as opposed to maybe spending all of their money on van pools, they would spend some money on helping build more affordable housing. And that's something that I don't think we've seen a lot of that in our area. But I think there's potentially some opportunity there for someone to take a look at that. I think, I know one of the other things I want to talk about, I mentioned at the very beginning, and I didn't want to leave people confused. I mentioned that we have some rental housing stock that is coming out of what I call an affordable home housing status. Can you explain that a little bit, Marianne, about what that involves?
Sure. If there's a housing project that had received in the past some sort of public funding, then one of the other rules that's attached to that public funding is what's called a term of affordability. So for instance, if you do new construction and you use certain public funding, all of those dwellings must be affordable for 20 years.
20 years.
20 years.
Okay. So when you get your federal funding or government funding, so you have the same restrictions on your house. You've got to keep them. You can't just decide one day you're going to go charge twice as much market rate.
No.
Okay, that's interesting.
And then the households who live in those houses are all also have to meet the income guidelines.
They have to qualify for that. Sure, that makes sense.
For the term of affordability.
And I've heard that there are, in our market here, there are several of the projects that are kind of reaching that 20-year maturity point, and some already have, and there's more to come, where potentially those units could be taken out of the affordable role and be put as market rate units.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So that potentially puts an even bigger drain on the availability of affordable housing. Before we wrap up today, Marianne or Ron, either one, can you tell us a little bit more about the Johnson County Affordable Homes Coalition, which we all are a member of? Just who is this group? Who's part of this coalition?
Well, I can talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
We are involved in the Johnson County Affordable Homes Coalition. It is a group. It's sort of a ad hoc group, or not ad hoc, but because we're going to meet regularly.
Right.
It's a group of people who provide affordable housing, people who provide shelter, and many concerned citizens of the area who are concerned about affordable housing.
It's a large group. It's a large group of there's got some government officials there.
Right.
We've got I know the church community, the religious community is very well represented there.
We've grown a lot over the past year.
It has really,
Yes.
and we meet every month, and I think kind of my take on it is we're there to be the voice for affordable housing, and to talk about the need for it, to break down some of the myths that we talked about earlier, which are continue to be there with us.
The Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County actually is the fiscal agent for the Affordable Homes Coalition.
Yes,
And
yes.
we've been able to do a lot with not very much money. But hopefully everybody who's been in Iowa City saw the affordable housing banners that
Right.
were downtown Iowa City during the month of April with the Realtors
Those were
banner
awesome, yeah.
for Fair Housing Month.
I know that I think the coalition is also working on some little PSA clips that kind of debunk some of the myths about affordable housing, about who
Yes.
lives there and who doesn't, and things like that. So we're anxious to see those come out. I also, as you mentioned, the realtors. Working on the other project, the realtors and the coalition are going to be working together to do an educational forum for realtors next
Right.
fall, and so that'll be. I'm personally very excited about that. So look forward to doing that too. Just about out of time here. Is there anything else that we should cover that we haven't thought of on the topic of affordable rental housing?
I'm just really glad that we have this opportunity to do something like this, to keep this topic, this issue at the forefront, and to keep it on people's minds, so that hopefully this movement that we have going will continue, and that we'll see some changes within our community.
I agree, and I think we are seeing that. We are
Right.
starting to see some momentum build around this issue of affordable housing. One, because it's becoming it's getting a critical mass here of a problem, and we are seeing the school district. It's affecting them and their boundary issues. The city governments are all looking at it. The county government is kind of coordinating a group governmental entity that is talking about these issues to see what can we do as individual cities, as a county, as a school district to help meet this problem. So I'm anxious to see how that moves forward. So I do think we have some momentum building, and I'm very excited about that too. Well, I want to thank our guests today, Bronis Petit, Director of Client Advocacy Services with DVIP, Domestic Violence Intervention Program, and Marianne Dennis, Executive Director of the Housing Fellowship in Iowa City. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Mark.
I also want to thank the PATV staff and volunteers for helping us produce the show, and the members of the Johnson County Affordable Homes Coalition. And check your PATV schedule, because we're going to be doing several of these shows in the coming months. This is our second in a series where we're going to talk about various aspects of the affordable housing issues here in Johnson County. I'm Mark Sines. Thanks again for watching, and have a great week.